When people hear the word intelligence, they often think of IQ, grades, logic, and academic performance. They think of test scores, analytical ability, and the kind of mental power that helps someone solve equations or memorize facts. But Daniel Goleman's emotional intelligence begins with a disruptive idea. Being smart in the traditional sense is not enough to explain why some people thrive in life while others, equally gifted on paper, struggle in work, relationships, and decision-making. Goleman argues that there is another kind of intelligence at work, one that shapes how we handle ourselves and how we deal with other people. This is emotional intelligence. It includes self-awareness, self-control, empathy, motivation, and social skill. In simple terms, it is the ability to understand emotions, manage them well, and use them wisely. This idea matters because life does not test us in a classroom. It tests us in conflict, stress, failure, disappointment, temptation, and relationships. You can be brilliant and still ruin opportunities if you cannot control your anger, read a room, recover from setbacks, or communicate with people effectively. On the other hand, someone with ordinary academic ability but strong emotional intelligence can often build trust faster, lead better, make wiser decisions, and create a more stable and successful life. Right away, the book shifts the conversation from what you know to how you operate. It asks a powerful question. When emotions rise, what happens to your judgment, your behavior, and your choices? That question is at the heart of this book. Emotional intelligence is not about being soft or overly emotional. It is about becoming more capable. It is about learning to work with your emotions instead of being ruled by them. And in a world where stress, distraction, and social friction are everywhere, that skill may be more valuable than ever. One of the most memorable ideas in emotional intelligence is that the brain has different systems that do not always work in harmony. Goleman explains that part of our emotional life is rooted in older brain structures built for survival. These systems react quickly to danger, threat, or emotional triggers. They are fast, automatic, and powerful. Meanwhile, the more rational parts of the brain think more slowly, weigh consequences, and make deliberate choices. This helps explain why people sometimes do things they later regret. A small insult turns into rage. A stressful comment causes panic. A moment of fear leads to a terrible decision. Goleman describes what happens when emotion overwhelms reason, sometimes called an emotional hijacking. In those moments, the emotional brain takes over before the rational brain has time to respond calmly. This is a key insight because it turns many personal failures into something understandable rather than mysterious. When people explode, shut down, or act impulsively, it is often not because they are evil or stupid. It is because they have not learned how to notice emotional escalation early enough to regain control. The problem is not that emotions exist. The problem is that unchecked emotions can overpower judgment. For listeners, this section is practical because it explains something we all experience. Have you ever said something in anger and regretted it an hour later? Have you ever made a decision under stress that looked foolish once you calmed down? That is the emotional brain outrunning the thinking brain. Goleman's point is not that emotion is bad. Emotion is necessary. But when emotion becomes the driver instead of the signal, life gets chaotic. Understanding this gives you leverage. It means self-mastery begins with awareness. You cannot manage what you do not notice. If you want a better life, one of the first skills to build is recognizing your emotional state before it turns into action. That pause between feeling and reacting is where emotional intelligence begins. Goleman makes it clear that emotional intelligence starts with self-awareness. Before you can manage emotions, you have to recognize them. Before you can choose a better response, you have to notice what you are feeling and why. This sounds simple, but in practice, many people go through life emotionally blind. They feel tension but do not name it. They feel resentment but call it tiredness. They feel fear but disguise it as anger or sarcasm. Self-awareness is the ability to observe your internal world clearly. It means noticing not only what emotion is present, but also how that emotion is influencing your thoughts, your body, and your behavior. When you are self-aware, you begin to catch patterns. You notice that criticism makes you defensive. You notice that uncertainty makes you restless. You notice that certain people, situations, or memories change your mood almost instantly. This skill is powerful because once you can name an emotion, you gain some distance from it. Instead of being consumed by anger, you can say, "I am feeling angry right now." Instead of drowning in anxiety, you can recognize, "I am feeling threatened or uncertain." That small shift creates space. It allows the rational part of the mind to return. Goleman shows that people with stronger self-awareness make better decisions because they understand their internal signals. They are less likely to confuse a passing emotion with a permanent truth. They do not assume every feeling must be obeyed. They become interpreters of emotion rather than prisoners of it. For self-improvement, this is one of the most useful lessons in the entire book. Many bad habits, broken relationships, and missed opportunities begin with a lack of self-awareness. When you do not understand your emotions, they quietly shape your life from behind the scenes. But once you begin observing them honestly, your behavior becomes more intentional. Self-awareness does not solve everything, but it gives you the map. And without that map, growth is mostly guesswork. If self-awareness is noticing emotion, self-regulation is what you do next. Goleman explains that emotionally intelligent people are not those who never feel anger, fear, jealousy, frustration, or sadness. They are the people who can manage those emotions without becoming destructive. They know how to pause, reflect, and respond in a way that serves their long-term goals rather than their immediate impulses. This is a major shift in how many people think about strength. Real strength is not pretending not to feel. Real strength is handling feeling wisely. Anyone can react. Anyone can lash out, avoid, blame, or shut down. But the ability to stay composed under pressure is rare, and it creates enormous advantages in life. Goleman shows that self-regulation protects relationships, improves judgment, and builds trust. People feel safer around those who can stay stable. Leaders become more credible when they do not panic under pressure. Professionals become more effective when they do not let mood dictate performance. In simple terms, emotional control is a competitive advantage. This does not mean repression. It does not mean burying emotions or becoming robotic. It means creating a healthy relationship with what you feel. Instead of being dragged around by every emotional wave, you learn to ride those waves without capsizing. You may still feel angry, but you do not send the destructive message. You may still feel anxious, but you do not let anxiety make every decision for you. For listeners, this lesson is deeply practical. It means learning to delay reaction, taking a breath, walking away for a moment, sleeping on a decision, asking what response will matter tomorrow, not just what feels good right now. The more emotional situations you face, the more valuable the skill becomes. Self-regulation is not glamorous, but it is one of the clearest marks of maturity. It turns emotional life from chaos into discipline. Goleman includes motivation as a core part of emotional intelligence, and this is an important point. Emotional intelligence is not only about staying calm or getting along with others. It is also about using emotion in a productive direction. Highly effective people often know how to channel feelings toward effort, persistence, and progress. This kind of motivation is deeper than external reward. It is not just about money, praise, or status. It is about internal drive. People with strong emotional intelligence often have the ability to keep going through frustration, delay gratification, and stay connected to a meaningful goal even when results are slow. This matters because success in most areas of life depends less on bursts of excitement and more on emotional endurance. The challenge is rarely knowing what to do. The challenge is doing it when you are bored, discouraged, distracted, or tempted to quit. Goleman helps explain why some people can stay engaged through difficulty. They can manage their emotional energy instead of letting discomfort shut them down. For self-improvement audiences, this is one of the most valuable lessons. A person may have talent, but without emotional discipline, talent often fades. The emotionally intelligent person learns to work through mood. They do not wait to feel perfect before acting. They can handle small failures without collapsing. They can stay hopeful without becoming delusional. This section also reminds us that emotion is not always an obstacle. It can be fuel. Passion, purpose, hope, and commitment are emotional forces too. When directed well, they become powerful allies. Goleman's message is that emotional intelligence is not about becoming less emotional. It is about becoming better at using emotion to support the life you want to build. One of the most human parts of emotional intelligence is its emphasis on empathy. Goleman argues that understanding other people is not just a social bonus. It is a serious life skill. Empathy is the ability to sense what others are feeling, see situations from their perspective, and respond with awareness rather than selfishness. This matters because relationships shape almost every area of life. Work depends on communication. Leadership depends on trust. Friendship depends on understanding. Family life depends on emotional sensitivity. Even conflict is easier to manage when you understand not only your own feelings, but the emotional reality of the other person. Goleman explains that empathy is not mind reading, and it is not always agreement. You can understand someone's emotions without approving of their behavior. Empathy simply means that you are not emotionally blind to the people around you. You notice tone, body language, silence, tension, and pain. You realize that words are only part of communication. This is especially powerful in a world where many conversations are reactive, rushed, and shallow. People often listen just enough to defend themselves or to prepare their next point. Empathy slows that down. It makes room for real understanding. And once people feel understood, they often become more open, less defensive, and more cooperative. For personal growth, empathy is not just about being nicer. It is about becoming more effective with people. The person who can read emotion well has an advantage in relationships, teamwork, negotiation, teaching, parenting, and leadership. Goleman's point is that emotional intelligence expands beyond the self. It becomes a bridge to others. And the better that bridge is built, the stronger your relationships become. If self-awareness and self-control help you manage yourself, social skills help you navigate the outside world. Goleman describes social skill as the visible side of emotional intelligence. It is the ability to communicate clearly, handle disagreement, build rapport, influence others positively, and maintain healthy relationships over time. This is where emotional intelligence becomes very practical. It shows up in how you speak during conflict. It shows up in whether people trust you. It shows up in your ability to collaborate, lead, apologize, persuade, and encourage. Social skills are not about manipulation or charm. They are about emotional effectiveness in human interaction. Goleman's message is that relationships are built not just on good intentions, but on skill. You may care about people and still communicate poorly. You may mean well and still create tension if you cannot listen, express yourself calmly, or read emotional cues accurately. Emotional intelligence helps close that gap. This lesson is especially relevant for work and career. In many professions, technical ability gets you in the door, but people's skills determine how far you go. Teams do not function well when trust is low. Leaders do not inspire when they are emotionally clumsy. Opportunities are often created or lost in moments of conversation. For listeners, the takeaway is clear: the way you make people feel affects the doors that open in your life. That does not mean becoming fake or trying to please everyone. It means learning how to relate to people with clarity, calmness, and respect. Emotional intelligence becomes visible when your relationships become stronger, Your communication becomes cleaner, and your presence becomes more stable. One reason emotional intelligence became so influential is that it challenged the way people think about professional success. Goleman argues that in many jobs, especially leadership roles, emotional intelligence matters as much as technical skill and sometimes more. People may be hired for expertise, but they often rise or fall based on temperament, communication, adaptability, and judgment under pressure. In the workplace, emotional intelligence influences almost everything. It affects how you receive feedback, how you respond to setbacks, how you work under stress, and how you treat colleagues. It affects whether others see you as steady, reactive, collaborative, defensive, trustworthy, or difficult. These factors may not show up on a resume, but they strongly shape career outcomes. Goleman makes the case that great performers are often distinguished not by raw intelligence alone, but by emotional qualities like resilience, initiative, empathy, and self-control. This is especially true in leadership. A leader who cannot manage their emotions can destabilize a whole team. A leader with empathy and composure can create trust, motivation, and clarity even in uncertainty. For viewers building careers, this lesson is vital. It means your emotional habits are not separate from your professional life. They are part of your professional value. When you manage stress well, people trust you more. When you listen well, people work with you more easily. When you stay calm in difficulty, you become more promotable. This part of the book is both encouraging and demanding. Encouraging because success is not reserved only for the naturally brilliant. Demanding because emotional maturity requires work. But that is also good news. Emotional intelligence can be developed. And if it can be developed, then your ability to succeed can grow far beyond what a test score ever predicted. Goleman explains that emotions do not stay contained within one person. They spread. Moods influence groups. Anxiety can infect a room. Calm can settle tension. One person's anger can trigger another person's defensiveness, and one person's steadiness can prevent conflict from escalating. This is emotional contagion, and once you notice it, you begin to see it everywhere. This matters because many relationships are shaped less by facts and more by emotional atmosphere. Arguments are not only about the topic being discussed. They are also about tone, timing, body language, accumulated resentment, and how safe each person feels. Emotional intelligence helps people recognize these invisible forces before they become destructive. In conflict, emotionally intelligent people are more likely to pause, listen, and respond without instantly escalating. They understand that being technically right is not always enough. If the emotional tone is wrong, even truth can land badly. They also know that unresolved emotions tend to return in stronger form later. For everyday life, this lesson is incredibly useful. In families, workplaces, friendships, and romantic relationships, emotional climate matters. The person who can regulate their energy often becomes the stabilizing force in the relationship. That does not mean carrying all the emotional weight alone. It means refusing to add chaos when tension appears. This section encourages a more mature way of relating. Instead of asking only, "What did they say?" we can ask, "What is happening emotionally in this interaction?" Instead of reacting to the surface, we can notice the deeper current. That awareness makes communication more skillful and relationships more durable. A major part of Goleman's book is the argument that emotional intelligence is not just a personal skill for adults. It is something that should be taught and developed from childhood. Children do not automatically learn how to handle anger, frustration, empathy, or impulse control. These abilities are shaped by family life, environment, example, and education. Goleman emphasizes that emotional habits formed early can affect the rest of life. A child who learns to calm down, name feelings, and empathize with others gains tools that will help in school, relationships, work, and mental well-being. A child who never develops those skills may struggle repeatedly, even if they are academically talented. This insight expands the book beyond business and productivity. It becomes a book about society, education, and human development. Goleman is essentially saying that emotional competence should be treated with the same seriousness as reading or math. If people are expected to cooperate, lead, parent, create, and live peacefully with others, they need emotional skills from an early age. For adult listeners, this section still applies. Even if childhood is behind us, many people are still carrying emotional patterns learned years ago. Some never learned healthy regulation. Some learned that anger gets attention. Some learned to suppress everything. Some learned to avoid hard conversations. Growth in adulthood often involves revisiting these old patterns and replacing them with better ones. This section carries an encouraging message. Emotional limitations are not fixed identity. They're often learned patterns, and learned patterns can be changed. That means improvement is possible at any age, even if the process takes patience. Emotional intelligence also explores the physical and mental costs of unmanaged emotional life. Chronic stress, constant anxiety, resentment, and emotional instability do not stay in the mind alone. They affect health, attention, sleep, energy, and overall quality of life. Goleman shows that emotional incompetence is not just inconvenient. It can be deeply damaging. When people live in constant emotional reactivity, their systems stay on alert. This makes clear thinking harder. It reduces patience. It damages relationships. It narrows perspective. Over time, unmanaged emotion can create a life that feels constantly tense, even when no immediate danger exists. This is one reason emotional intelligence matters so much. It is not about becoming perfect. It is about reducing unnecessary suffering. The more you can recognize and regulate emotional distress, the less likely you are to live in a permanent state of internal turbulence. For modern audiences, this message feels especially relevant. Many people live overstimulated lives. Their attention is fragmented. Their stress is constant. Their nervous system rarely gets a real break. In that environment, emotional intelligence becomes a form of protection. It helps people calm down, think clearly, and avoid making life harder than it already is. Goleman's lesson here is powerful. Emotions are not small side issues. They shape health, judgment, and the experience of daily life. If you ignore them, they will still influence everything. If you learn to work with them, your mind becomes clearer and your life becomes more stable. One of the most encouraging ideas in the book is that emotional intelligence is not fixed. Unlike the old belief that intelligence is mostly set, Goleman suggests that emotional competencies can be strengthened over time. People can become more self-aware. They can improve their self-control. They can become better listeners, more empathetic, and more emotionally resilient. This matters because it turns the book from a diagnosis into a possibility. It means emotional mistakes do not have to define your future. A reactive person can become calmer. A disconnected person can become more empathetic. A person who once avoided difficult emotions can learn to face them with more skill. Improvement begins with attention. It grows through reflection, practice, feedback, and repeated effort in real situations. Emotional intelligence is built in moments. When you choose not to send the angry reply, when you notice your defensiveness, when you ask a better question, when you listen instead of interrupting, when you recover from frustration more quickly than before. The book does not promise instant transformation. These changes take time because emotional habits run deep. But the central message is optimistic. You are not trapped in your current emotional patterns. Growth is possible. For self-improvement viewers, this may be the biggest takeaway of all. Emotional intelligence is not just a concept to admire. It is a skill set to train. And because it touches nearly every area of life, even small improvements create large benefits over time. By this point, The big ideas of the book become easier to see in ordinary moments. Emotional intelligence looks like noticing your irritation before it becomes an argument. It looks like staying calm during criticism so you can actually learn from it. It looks like recognizing when someone is hurt even if they are hiding it behind silence. It looks like delaying gratification, apologizing sincerely, handling disappointment with maturity, and choosing thoughtful action over emotional impulse. In everyday life, emotional intelligence is often quiet. It does not always look dramatic. Sometimes it is the ability to keep a promise when motivation drops. Sometimes it is the discipline to leave a tense conversation and return later with a clearer mind. Sometimes it is choosing empathy over ego. This is important because self-improvement can easily become too abstract. People talk about mindset, growth, and success, but the real test is daily behavior. Emotional intelligence lives in those daily moments. It shows up in traffic, in comments, in deadlines, in family tension, in mistakes, in disappointment, and in success. It shapes the tone of ordinary life. The book's wisdom becomes especially valuable here because it invites listeners to stop looking for rare breakthrough moments and start training emotional skill in common situations. Every ordinary frustration becomes a practice session. Every conflict becomes feedback. Every emotional trigger becomes a chance to understand yourself better. That is what makes the book so useful. It takes something invisible and makes it practical. Emotional intelligence is not theory alone. It is a better way to live, moment by moment. At its core, emotional intelligence is a book about human effectiveness. Daniel Goleman does not argue that emotion should be eliminated. He argues that emotion should be understood, managed, and integrated into a wiser way of living. The goal is not coldness. The goal is mastery. The book leaves us with a powerful truth. Your success, peace, and relationships depend heavily on how you handle emotion. Not just the pleasant emotions, but the difficult ones too. Anger, fear, shame, stress, envy, disappointment, and hurt all carry power. If they remain unconscious, they drive your life. If they become understood, they can be managed and transformed. This is why emotional intelligence matters so much. It affects your decisions, your resilience, your relationships, your work, your health, and your future. It determines whether pressure makes you reckless or wise. It determines whether conflict destroys trust or strengthens understanding. It determines whether setbacks break your momentum or sharpen your maturity. For anyone pursuing self-improvement, this book offers a deeper path than surface productivity tips. It says that a better life is not built only by learning more facts or chasing more goals. It is built by becoming someone who can remain aware, steady, empathetic, and intentional in the middle of real life. In the end, emotional intelligence is not just about being better with feelings. It is about being better at life. The more clearly you understand yourself and the more skillfully you deal with others, the stronger your decisions become and the more peaceful your inner world becomes. That is the promise of this book, and it is a promise that remains incredibly relevant.